Hey there folks, Recon Trooper here, back with another video and another review video, as I haven't done one of these since I think it was either Fallen Order or Lego Force Awakens, one of the two, whichever one was the last one anyway. I know I did both, but I just don't remember which one was the more recent of the two. But anyway, I'm just finally decided to do another review, and this time it'll be a movie review, because of a movie I decided to watch last night, from the time of this recording, I mean, last night, and, I just decided, hey, maybe I should review this movie after watching it. And so, here I am reviewing it, and, just before I get into it, be sure to like and subscribe and comment if you so desire. No picking fights with anyone or me, or trying to anyway, because the fights will be deleted as fast as they're attempting to be started, and they will not be visible even by me because of that, because, well, they'll be deleted. So, yeah, just be civil in your comments if you make any, and try not to be, weird or anything, or aggressive in the comments. Just civilized. And also, this movie is from 2004, and so as a result, I will probably be spoiling chunks of it, just so you know. So if you haven't seen it, then stop watching or listening and whatever. If you don't care, then I guess that's up to you. And if you have seen it before, and great also. But, just get that, getting that warning out of the way. And so, as you can tell by the title, this is a movie review on iRobot. And first, let me just say I don't really have a favorite actor or anything, as long as they do a good job, which I'd say the ones in this movie do a good job. They're not as bad as some others apparently are, from back in those days anyway. It's, I think the actors in this movie, first of all, I think they do a good job with what they're given. There's the detective guy, Detective Spooner, who's played by Will Smith, and this is before that whole event happened a year or two ago. So, this is long before that. So, don't worry. So, he didn't get himself into trouble quite yet. By this point in his career. I'll start with him. I think he's a pretty good character, Detective Spooner. Actually, to really start off before I continue with him, this movie is a really good one, because it kind of, it's not necessarily truthful, because it takes place in the future, and by this point in real life, this year, 2025, it's only about 10 years from now by the time we get to iRobot's time, and something tells me the technology isn't going to get that far as close to that as they portray it, but you know. But with just being what it is, I really like this movie. I don't have a favorite movie per se. I just have movies I like, and there's ones that I haven't seen, so I can't say that I like or don't. And then there's ones that I do not like that I, of course, can't really remember them, and therefore, I can't really name them, so I just know there's ones I don't like, and or maybe I did at the time, but looking at it with a more mature perspective, I don't anymore or whatever. But iRobot is certainly a movie that, it certainly, I think, holds up for being a pretty decent, action-packed kind of crime, man versus machine sort of thrill ride. And there's actually, like, it's not sewed into the whole movie itself, but there are at least a couple of aspects of horror, I would say. I mean, maybe not horror to some viewers, but some I would consider horror because it's, pretty, it's when you see these certain scenes, like there's one scene of Detective Spooner on this sandy hill, and there's a bunch of cargo containers in this, this is in Chicago, I guess, and so the river in Chicago is now just a sand dune, and there's all these containers, and it has all these robots inside. They have all these robots inside, and there's this shot of Will Smith, or Spooner, I should say, looking out over them, and you see all these red lights on some of the sides because he's looking at it from a certain angle, and before showing us, the audience, what's actually going on over there, it just kind of gives this slight, just this ever so slight sense of horror, because you have no idea what's happening. Like it definitely looks like something that could freak you out if, like you're, I don't know, if you don't have the sensibilities to, get a hold of yourself, so to speak. And so that, it's not, like I said, it's not embedded in the whole movie per se, but there are certainly certain bits that are, that have a slight horror feel to them, at least for me. Some people might not find it horrifying or whatever, but yeah, so it's kind of like, it's an action-packed, man versus robot, mystery crime thriller with just a very slight touch of horror here and there. But not so much that it's like in almost every other shot you see or anything. It's just, and so, yeah, it's I'd say it's a pretty decent film. I like watching it when I do, and it's on talking back to talking about the characters briefly here. It certainly has, Spooner is actually not a bad character. I think Smith does him pretty well. He's basically this cop, like, it's, in a world like this isn't Terminator style. This is basically man and machine kind of coexisting, so to speak, and machines are kind of taking over man's duty in terms of, humans just order the machines, the robots, to do things, and the robots, because of they have these things called the three laws. Because of that, embedded in their programming, they basically are used as tools, for humans that either can't or just don't want to do things themselves anymore. And so the robots are kind of the servants, kind of act like the servants in this case. The three laws are interesting because it's basically the law. There's basically the first law of robots can't harm humans. Then there's, I should say robots can't harm humans or allow humans to be harmed. So in other words, if somebody, falls off, if somebody is, some dumb person, for that matter, is trying to get selfies in a dangerous spot on one of the buildings, and they almost fall off, and a robot is there, it's programmed to help that person up, no matter what. Like it's programmed to not allow a person to be harmed in any way. So, except by itself, like it can't, the robot itself can't harm a human, but at the same time, it can't let a human be harmed. So if a dumb person is taking selfies on like the highest building in Chicago, in this movie, I should say, and they almost fall off as a result of their recklessness and their ignorance, the robot by its programming just has to help the person up. It has no sense of this person was being dumb, so I'll just leave them or whatever. Like it has to help the person up. And then there's the second law is all about, a robot must obey any order that a human gives it, no matter what it is, as long as it doesn't mean, ordering it to harm another human, because again, the first law, it can't contradict the first law as long as that's the case. But if it's, help this person, if it's, this person ordering a robot to, do something dumb, just like run over to that stop sign and run back just for the heck of it, the robot, by all accounts, just has to do it because of the second law. And then the third law is all about, the robot must protect its own existence as long as it isn't doing so against a human's wishes, and because of the second law. And then it can't harm a human by protecting itself either, or it can't protect itself in a way that'll harm a human, I should say, because of the first law. And so, there's these three laws that are all about really, helping robots to coexist with humans while not letting bad things happen to them, kind of thing. And of course, it doesn't go all that well. And so, and all these people, they're so blinded, they're so involved with themselves that they think, we got robots now, what do we need to do? And, Spooner is kind of the only human that actually enjoys being human. He has this extreme bias towards robots, which it's kind of like, I hate the neighbor, 6 doors down from me, and I just do, I don't need a reason. I just hate them, even if they're the nicest, most humble neighbors you could possibly imagine having, and I just hate them for whatever, for no reason at all. And Spooner at the beginning kind of acts like that, and I think, he certainly portrays it very well. He certainly portrays this bias really well. Like, every time a robot is next to him, he just wants him to get out of his way or get out of his face or whatever. Like, he has absolutely no respect for robots whatsoever. And at first it kind of just seems like how what I described earlier, with the neighbor. You don't need a reason, you just hate the person, whatever. It's kind of like that. But eventually it is explained in the film, his reason, and it's a pretty tragic reason involving a little girl, and in this accident that he and this other car end up getting into. And this one robot sees the accident and saves him instead of the girl who is drowning. And it's all based on logic, not just common sense, like save the darn girl that is drowning here, like leave me, I'm like the girl herself is drowning, and he's still above water for the most part, for some of the part. So, the robot saves him as a result of its logic, instead of, it having, no feeling or common sense to it. And that's what causes this hatred all of a sudden towards robots, because robots have no heart. And so, like, the robot just lets the girl die as a result of saving Spooner. And it's a pretty tragic, well, it's not only a pretty tragic, event that Spooner, because he kind of narrates the whole thing as you're watching this flashback happen. And it's pretty tragic, but it kind of puts into perspective, yeah, maybe he does have a good reason to hate robots. Not that all the robots are bad necessarily, but in that circumstance, you can't help but hate a robot after it lets one person die, especially a young girl, or a kid, I should say, while it saves you, while your life is in much less peril, actually. You're kind of in the same peril, but you're at your chances of survival are a little higher, because maybe you're not in exactly the same position as the other person or whatever, and the robot picks you anyway. It's kind of, it certainly has some good drama in it for sure, and some tragic emotion, and yeah, Detective Spooner sure plays it off pretty good, I think, for what he's given. And I have then there's he also has a kind of a robotic arm because of the accident, so his left arm, as a result, he's kind of like the Winter Soldier, if the Winter Soldier's arm was still looked like a regular arm with skin texture and everything, but it's robotic or mechanical or whatever you want to call it. And it's kind of like that, it's literally like that. It's all the way up to his shoulder, his whole left arm all the way up to his shoulder. And obviously that's not, revealed as to, in the beginning he kind of has scars on him, but you don't really know what it's really about. You just see him kind of holding, touching his shoulder like it hurts a lot or something for some reason. But then it shows later on what really is going on. And so, and then, yeah, there's the doctor, his doctor ally that he meets early on in the film. And the actress, I don't know her name, she's pretty decent too. She's kind of like this person that's very much out of her element because she's used to this world of robotics and automation and everything. And, Spooner is not. Spooner is, he's very much old school type, got old school type interests, I guess, and awareness. And so as a result, it's kind of funny to see this doctor who's used to automation, like voice commands and stuff, and coming into certain situations where, like she discovers there's buttons on things, and when she pushes them, things happen, and her voice isn't going to just shut it off, and it's kind of it's certainly a funny couple of moments in the movie showing that, and even some of the way she says things, like she doesn't realize that, she kind of motor mouths a bunch of stuff that Spooner has no idea what she's talking about until she says it in more plain words, as opposed to all these kind of scientific words that even I can't say for sure how to say them. I don't even remember what they are, but but she's basically kind of like a psychiatrist for robots or something of that sort of thing. But I think they play off each other pretty well in the film. And Calvin, that's her character's name. That's the character's name, Dr. Calvin. They play off each other pretty well. They turn out to be a pretty good duo team, and as far as I'm aware, they are just that, a team, just like Black Widow and Hawkeye, or Scarlet Witch and Hawkeye for that matter. There's nothing romantic going on. They become, sort of friendly and eventually allies by the end of the movie. They're not, they're not anything more. Which I don't mind. I mean, not every movie has to have romance in it just to be, good. I mean, after all, look at things like Sonic, I mean, there is some romance, but it's between a husband and wife, not just a man and a woman, sort of thing. And actually, the Knuckles show has actually no romance, and it's pretty good. And I don't care what anybody thinks about it. I think it's good, and I'm sure other people do as well. And I'm not gonna back down from my saying that. But it's kind of like that. There's this one robot guy named Sonny, and he's kind of the third main guy. He's played by the same guy who does K2SO in Rogue One. I guess actually learned recently that the actor, his publicity was greatly diminished because the makers felt he was taking away from Will Smith's. He was taking the spotlight away from Will Smith, so I guess his only credentials are in the credits at the end. So, which I mean, I'm not exactly for that kind of thing, but especially if he put in all the work and effort to making the character what he is in the movie. But but he does a pretty decent job as Sonny, and Sonny's kind of like the only robot that doesn't have to follow these 3 laws, which leads to an incredible story of this old man that made Sonny, and in fact he's kind of like the godfather of robots, and he's very much it's very much interesting how this story goes from one thing to another, and then to the finale. It's kind of like starts as a mystery crime scene or crime, to kind of feels starting to feel like it's some sort of conspiracy going on, to finally the climax where everything is finally gets put together, and you finally, you kind of have all these mysteries in the beginning that finally are sort of answered in the end. And it's a pretty good spectacle of a movie, I think. It's tons of action for sure. I mean, it can't be all action every second of the movie. There's got to be certain points that maybe people don't care about, but like if you want just plain constant action, go play a video game or something. Movies are not supposed to be like video games. They're supposed to have stories that the action only comes when it's supposed to, not just play through the entire time. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless to even make a movie when you have nothing to really care about except look at all the people that are fighting, or people and robots fighting each other in this case, or whatever. But yeah, it's I think it's a pretty good movie. I think I enjoy watching it, and anyone who's seen it as well, I'm sure enjoys and has enjoyed did enjoy watching it, I'm sure would say the same. And it's not it's less than, I think it's less than 2 hours, so it's also it's not as long as some other movies can be. And I don't know if the Terminator movies are 2 hours. I shouldn't say I've never seen. I think I saw the first one a long time ago, but I barely remember it. But this one isn't the longest movie you could imagine. Certainly isn't boring if you actually are invested and interested every step of the way, for the most part. And it's if you're a fan of the robot movies, like man versus machine type things, and I think if you haven't seen the movie, it is recommended if you can somehow get it on DVD, Blu-ray, or whatever. It is quite a recommended movie, I would say. It's certainly, there's no sequels, so, you don't have to worry about having to watch it before watching the second one to understand everything that's going on in that movie and any references to the previous one, because it is just the one movie. Although a sequel apparently was in the works initially, but there's been absolutely nothing for 21 years now since then. But yeah, for sure, I would recommend you see it. Anyone listening still, and I think if you're not easily bored by a movie, I think it would certainly be worth your time. Like, there's the CGI, I would say, isn't, I shouldn't critique it, because this was, again, 2004, so it wouldn't be fair really to compare it to today's technology and CGI and everything. And so based on when the year it was released, or the time it was released, I think it holds up for the most part. Like, there are a couple of times when you look at the robot's hands, and sometimes their knuckles actually have hinges on them. Other times they just look like balls between each joint, and it kind of is weird. But other than that, there's nothing really. Like, these most of these robots have kind of human, I wouldn't say human faces, but like their faces have human movements to them. It's almost like it's almost like those kind of robots you see where like the back of their head is all shows the mechanics and everything, and then the front is like a human face. and it's kind of like that, except their faces are white and somewhat transparent, especially around the edges. But you certainly see their nose and their eyes and their mouth, moving and emoting and everything. And it's I think it's a banger for sure. I think it's a banger of a movie for sure. It's not in any way a boring movie in my opinion. And if I were to rate it, I know there's some YouTubers that I've listened to that maybe have a slightly better way of reviewing movies. I'm not one of them, but whatever. But it's not. I would, like my rating would probably be different than his or theirs or whatever. But based on what I see about it, I wouldn't say it's a perfect movie. I don't think any movie is perfect, not even certain ones that people like that others hate. But I think I would at least rate it maybe either a B+ or an A-, or even somewhere in between at the, as well, A- at most, B+ at least, and then somewhere in between is the average spot. And so, it's certainly a good movie. I highly recommend it if you're into robot stuff and you're kind of interested in just something that's different than the norm that you've seen. Like, again, this is not Terminator. This is not obviously it's not Star Wars. They are called robots, not droids. Except I think in A New Hope, I think Luke only once ever says robot, and that's before he goes to his homestead to find his aunt and uncle burnt to a crisp. But other than that, they're called droids in Star Wars. But anyway, but yeah, it's highly recommended for anyone who likes robots and likes man versus machine type things that aren't as, perhaps dark, brutal, and, this isn't an R movie. I mean, there's a couple of swears, but this certainly isn't like Terminator where there's, I think F words, and I think there's even, nudity. There is some nudity, but it's blurred out, so it's not like crystal clear seeing it, It's kind of people in the distance or people behind like a shower door that, blurs everything from the other side, kind of thing. It's very much, it's a good movie. That's all I can really say. It's a good movie. It's recommended for sure. It's not, too violent. It's not too, gruesome. There's just enough of certain things in it that can keep you in suspense, and up until the credits. And yeah, so like I said, A+, B-, or somewhere in between is where I would rate it. Or yeah, A-, B+, or in between, somewhere I would rate it. So, if you haven't seen it, then by all means try to find it, on eBay or something, and watch it. It's a pretty decent movie. It's not the kind of thing that, would terrify you necessarily. Just, it would be pretty suspenseful if you saw it, I think, and only if you're into that kind of thing. If you're someone who just hates movies for the heck of it, then I guess, there's nothing I can say. But Yeah, so if you enjoy this 34, almost 35 minute long review now, and feel free to give a like and subscribe if you so choose, and comment. Again, just be civil. Don't try to pick fights, or your fights will be ended as quickly as they are started and without hesitation. And if you enjoy this video, then it'd be, and feel free to support my channel in some capacity. And so until the next one, later folks.